President Biden just held his first face-to-face meeting with China's President Xi since he took office. The tensions between the two countries here at home are pretty tough. And while the leaders spoke about Taiwan, economic competition, and inflation, according to a readout of their 3-hour-long meeting, the president did not address fentanyl coming from China, the Uyghurs, of course. The origins of COVID was not on the list. He did use their sit-down to restart dialogue on climate change. And he also said that instead of pushing China to renounce violence and warfare, well, watch.
I'm not suggesting this is kumbaya, everybody is going to go away with everything in agreement. But I do not believe there's a need for concern of as one of you raised the legitimate question, a new Cold War. And I think that I'll conclude by saying it this way. I want to be clear, and be clear with all leaders, but particularly with Xi Jinping, that I mean what I say and I say what I mean. So there's no misunderstanding.
Morgan, I'll save for the Colombia-Cambodia gaffe in a moment, because we don't know what he meant. We don't know what he said. But anyway, take it away.
Yeah. So listen, I'll start with the positives and the negatives. I've been a part of meetings like these, especially with Mike Pompeo. 3.5 hours is a long meeting. So there's clearly a lot that they covered in that time, which is incredibly important because it was the first time they were meeting face-to-face. And as I've been saying on this network, I thought that Xi would be sizing up Biden the way Putin did before he invaded Ukraine. So that's something I've been concerned about. So the length of the meeting is good. I also thought it was very good, actually, that the Chinese and the Americans had a joint statement that reiterated both of their opposition to the threat or the use of threat of nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Why is that important? Because Putin is now basically beholden to China and Xi Jinping. Putin has been threatening nuclear weapons, which would be bad for the planet. So the fact that he came out and said that, those are the two positive things that I see. The negative coming out of it, and Mike Pompeo said this earlier with Dana, huge mistake to make climate change your #1 priority in these conversations. They're building more coal plants than ever. They're not going to keep their word. So as you pointed out at the beginning, why are we not talking about fentanyl, the chemical precursors that go from China to Mexico, the #1 killer of young people? Why aren't we talking about the origins of COVID-19? Are we just going to let them get away with this? Like, they've never had an independent investigation, never allowed independent scientists to come in and to tell the world what the true origins of COVID is. So we're just going to let them get off scot-free.
On the COVID issue, though, in the very beginning, I mean, Thailand would have been part of this. There were other countries who would have joined us in a coalition to go in there. So it wouldn't have just been us. We may have missed the date on that, though. We don't know, because apparently we're too weak, or whatever the word is we want to use, to even ask for the opportunity again. It's never too late to do something great, but it might be to get things started. I don't know. Brian, the whole time Morgan was talking, it was like we were in church and you were nodding to the Reverend, saying, amen, amen.
Well, I'm amazed at Morgan. I mean, coming up with the good points in this, that's a great way to start it.
I'm a diplomat.
No, it's good, and you're a diplomat. I'm watching this thing, and all I see is President Xi in full throttle domination mode on the world stage. And I'm watching our president walk into that, and he is not in a position of strength. And then to have climate change be the headline issue here. I mean, they are building coal plants all over the place. They are not interested in climate change objectives unless it's to constrain the U.S. economy.
So let me follow up with that, because when we've seen the president sort of capitulate on different energy issues, I mean, I guess you could ask Senator Manchin
on
about
every
this,
energy
because
issue.
Senator Manchin couldn't have seen the president saying what he did in recent days. We're going to shut all the coal plants. I mean, so what is his plan? He's going to make everything here non-sufficient, and then are we going to be buying coal from China next?
Well,
Just like we're buying oil from Venezuela?
Buying batteries from China, which puts them in a stronger position than they are now. I mean, Xi Jinping must look at President Biden coming to this meeting and just say, this is somebody who I can outmaneuver on every important issue of the day. And there's nothing, I mean, the positive points aside, I don't think there's anything President Biden did on that stage to change the game for the United States. And this is a game we will not win over the long term if we keep playing it.
And the body language was very telling. I
Yes.
saw that the two, when they came together for the picture, which the two heads of state always do, Biden tried to smile and Xi Jinping just stood there as stiff as a board and did not look happy. It was very interesting.
He's not confused about our relationship.
No, that's right.
You know, when you...
He knows there's a Cold War.
When you go on a date with someone, it's been 20 years for me, but when you go on a date with somebody and somebody looks like they're into the movie and the other person keeps getting up to get popcorn, I mean, that's basically it. He knows that we're not friends, and he treats us accordingly. Dagan.
He treats us as if we are sucking up to him and that we are inferior to China. Certainly based on Joe Biden's policies and his language, that's how he behaves. It's not too much to ask of the President of the United States to stand up for the surviving families of the million Americans, more than 1 million Americans who die from COVID.
Right.
It's not too much for him to say, China, we need to talk about the origins. Whether it's too late or not, it's never too late for those surviving families to hear that from the President of the United States. It's not too late for the families of the hundreds of thousands of young people who have died from fentanyl poisonings here in the United States. So Biden can't stand up for all of those families, but he can stand up in front of the world at the top of that press conference and humble brag about the Democrats' victory in the midterms, which is exactly what he did. So instead of empathy from this guy, we get antipathy to the American people. One more thing about our reliance on China. So climate change is the issue. Well, climate change and Biden's push toward green energy has continued to enrich China. As Michael Schellenberger, who has written about this repeatedly, spending $370 billion in the Inflation Reduction Act, subsidizes solar panels and wind turbines and makes China richer and stronger because of it. Wind, solar, and batteries require 1,000% more steel, concrete, glass, lithium, all of that. China's market share of renewables and EV materials is already twice of OPEC's share of oil.
Wow, and that's what you're talking about with those batteries. I do want to get to this, and then Emily, I'll come straight to you. And we don't make light of this. It just is sort of his signature. Here's Biden.
I'm heading down to, first of all, going to Cairo for the environmental effort, then heading over to Colombia, and then, Cambodia. I'm thinking the Western Hemisphere.
I want to thank the Prime Minister for Colombia's leadership in the ASEAN chair.
And I note, Harris, that after that gaffe, the mainstream media, of course, said, well, in comparison to Trump, this was simply a bug bite versus a mountain. So no matter what, the enormity of the gaffe, the disrespect that illuminated toward our allies was simply overshadowed by the media's obsession with a former president. I appreciate that you brought up the body language of Biden and Xi, because it reminded me, you guys have seen those videos, the wildlife videos of the cougar stalking maybe a rabbit or a hiker or something. That is what it looked like. This old lumbering Labrador walks across the stage with his hand out the whole time, and there's just like a cougar sitting there, because as Secretary Pompeo articulated so beautifully, so commandingly after we saw his comments live, he said, so he talks about compete without confrontation. Confrontation is already underway. The CCP has been inside the gates, Pompeo said, for the last decade. They are inside our universities, our research systems, our military installations. He said we need to go at it diplomatically, politically, militarily, and economically in all these realms, each of them. And to say, in my opinion, that for the president to say, oh gosh, no, we've been on the same page and we're all about climate and there's no confrontation, does such a disservice to the ordinary American that is battling the effects of China's domination, that has been battling the effects in taxes and fees and shoddy products and the undermining of our American pride, of our American placement and priority. All of that is because of Xi's and the CCP's takeover that the prior administration had a great handle on, a great priority on, and unfortunately this administration does not.
Look, I know we got to go here, and I'll just say this. If you can't be on the world stage now, you're humble bragging about the fact that you just won in the midterm elections and lost the fewest seats than any president in 40 years, because that's one of the things he has said, President Biden. If you can't take that moment if you can't grab that moment to hold Xi accountable on some things, if you can't bring up the Uyghurs and just say, I'm worried about them, when would you ever do it? Is the answer never?
Never.
Never.
Not this
okay.
president.
Coming up, after clinching the Senate, Democrats are now eyeing the unthinkable, holding the House.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Compagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.